Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive we've curated just for you.
It's going to be a good one.
Yeah, we're going all the way back to the Sea of Galilee,
Back in time.
around 30 A.D.,
Oh, yeah.
to explore some of the most well-known miracles of Jesus.
Some really amazing stories.
That's right, and we're going to be diving deep into the Gospel of Matthew, chapters 14 through 17.
That's right.
We're talking about feeding thousands with almost nothing, walking on water.
Impossible.
Even a mountaintop that seems to glow.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to think about how these stories would have been heard by those who first heard them, you know?
Absolutely.
What they reveal to us.
Living in the 21st century, it's not just about the spectacle.
The miracles themselves.
Right, but what they tell us about Jesus.
About faith.
And even ourselves.
Exactly. So to give us a little context, it's believed that the Gospel of Matthew was written for a Jewish Christian audience.
Okay.
Sometime in the second half of the first century. So picture this, a community that's witnessed the Roman Empire crushing rebellion.
Right.
That's grappling with what it means to follow Jesus after his death and resurrection.
Mm.
And then they hear these stories.
Stories that would have been so powerful to them.
Of course.
Offering hope, reaffirming Jesus' identity, and providing guidance for navigating their own challenges.
Okay, so let's jump into the first miracle.
Okay.
The one that always makes me hungry.
Always.
Jesus feeding the 5,000.
Oh, yeah.
We've got this massive crowd gathered by the Sea of Galilee, captivated by Jesus' words, but as the day wears on, they start to get hungry.
And we have to remember, hunger wasn't just a minor inconvenience back then.
Right.
It was a real threat.
Of course.
So when the disciples suggested sending everyone away to find food, you know what Jesus does?
What does he do?
The complete opposite.
Oh, really?
He asks them what they have.
Oh.
All they can find is this little boy's lunch.
5 loaves?
5 loaves of bread and 2 fish.
I mean, what would you do in that situation?
Yeah, 5,000 hungry people.
And that's it.
That's all you got.
Yeah.
It's hard to even imagine.
Yeah.
But this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Jesus takes this simple meal, blesses it, breaks it, and somehow it's enough to feed everyone with leftovers.
It's like the ultimate potluck, right?
The ultimate potluck.
But this miracle clearly goes beyond just satisfying physical hunger.
It does.
What deeper meaning do you see here?
Well, bread was a staple food, right?
Okay.
It symbolized sustenance, life itself, in fact. Jesus later calls himself the bread of life in John's gospel.
He does.
So this miracle points to Jesus providing not just physical nourishment, but spiritual nourishment as well.
So it's like he's offering something that satisfies a deeper hunger, the kind we all experience even today.
Precisely, that yearning for purpose, for connection, for something beyond ourselves.
Wow, that really adds a whole other dimension to this story.
It does.
But the day isn't over yet. It's not.
Later that evening, the disciples are out on the Sea of Galilee when this massive storm rolls in.
Classic image, right?
Oh, yeah.
The boat being tossed around.
Yeah.
The disciples feeling utterly powerless against the forces of nature.
I mean, how do you think they must have felt?
Terrified, probably.
Yeah.
Like they were at the mercy of the storm.
Completely.
And then in the dead of night, they see this figure walking towards them on the water.
Oh, wow.
It's Jesus.
Can you imagine the shock, the disbelief?
I can't.
This is a powerful demonstration of Jesus's authority over nature, something that would have resonated
deeply with those first listeners.
Absolutely. But then Peter, always the impulsive one, decides he wants to try walking on water too.
Oh, cute.
And Jesus says, come on.
This is where we see faith in action, but also the very human tendency to doubt.
Of course.
So at first, Peter's walking just fine, full of belief.
Yeah.
But then he takes his eyes off Jesus, looks at the waves, and starts to sink.
It's like that doubt can just creep in so easily.
Even when we're trying to step out in faith.
So true. But the encouraging thing is, even when Peter's faith falters, Jesus is right there to catch him.
It's a powerful reminder that even when we feel like we're drowning in our own storms, we're not alone.
Exactly. And this brings up a question for you to consider.
Okay.
What storms might you be facing in your own life right now?
Wow.
And where do you need to trust that Jesus is there to help you navigate those challenges?
That's a great question to reflect on. And it leads us to a very different kind of story, a different kind of encounter.
Okay.
We're switching locations to Tyre and Sidon Gentile territory.
Outside of Jewish lands.
And we meet this woman.
A Canaanite woman. to be specific.
Okay.
That detail is really important because it shows that Jesus' ministry wasn't limited to just one group of people.
Right.
He crossed cultural and religious boundaries.
This woman is desperate. Her daughter is suffering terribly possessed by a demon, and she begs Jesus to heal her.
It's interesting how Jesus initially seems hesitant to respond to her pleas.
Yeah.
He even says, "It is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs."
I can see how that might sound harsh to our modern ears.
Yeah.
Could you explain what's going on there?
Yeah, he's speaking within the context of his culture,
Okay.
where there was a clear distinction between Jews and Gentiles.
Okay.
But the woman doesn't back down.
Oh, wow.
She comes back with an incredibly humble and persistent response.
Okay.
Even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table.
Her words are so powerful.
They are.
What do you think is the significance of her persistence?
I think this story highlights the power of persistent prayer.
Yeah.
It reminds us to keep seeking, to keep knocking.
Yeah.
Because sometimes breakthroughs come when we least expect them.
I think a lot of us can relate to that feeling of our prayers not being heard.
Oh, yeah.
And this woman's story is just such an encouragement to keep going.
Yeah.
To keep believing.
Absolutely. And it also challenges us to examine our own hearts. You know,
right.
Are we open to seeing God work in unexpected ways
Yeah.
through people who might be different from us?
That's a powerful question, and it leads us to the next section of our deep dive,
Okay.
where we encounter a major turning point in the story.
A turning point.
We're moving from individual miracles to a moment where Jesus' identity becomes even clearer.
Okay, we're talking about Peter's confession, right?
Yes.
The scene is Caesarea Philippi, and Jesus asks his disciples the big question.
The big question.
Who do you say I am?
And it's Peter who steps up and boldly proclaims, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God."
What do you think was going through Peter's mind in that moment?
It feels like a light bulb moment, like they're really starting to understand who Jesus is.
Exactly. And this declaration
Yeah.
that Jesus is the Messiah is foundational to Christian belief.
Okay, so we've got these incredible miracles, this profound confession of faith.
Yeah.
What comes next?
Next, we're going to experience something truly extraordinary.
Okay.
We're heading up a mountain.
Oh.
And get ready for things to get well luminous.
You're talking about the Transfiguration, one of the most awe-inspiring stories in the Gospels.
It is.
The scene is set. Jesus takes Peter, James, and John up a high mountain.
Likely Mount Hermon, according to tradition.
Okay.
And it's here that everything changes.
Wow.
Suddenly, Jesus is radiating light.
Whoa.
His clothes become dazzling white.
Oh, wow.
And Moses and Elijah appear beside him, engaged in conversation.
I mean, what do you think was going through the disciples' minds witnessing this?
I know.
To have Moses and Elijah just appear.
How did they even know it was them?
That's a good question.
It must have been a truly overwhelming experience.
I can imagine.
Matthew's gospel simply says that they recognized them.
Okay.
Remember, these figures were absolutely legendary in Jewish tradition.
Oh, yeah.
Their appearance would have been instantly meaningful.
So it's not just a random cameo.
No, not at all.
It's a deliberate connection between Jesus and these towering figures of faith.
Exactly. And it adds another layer to the meaning of the Transfiguration. It's not just about Jesus' individual glory, but about his place within the larger story of God's plan for humanity.
It sounds like you're describing some kind of cosmic family reunion.
It kind of is.
With Jesus at the center.
At the center.
That's incredible.
It is a pivotal moment, though.
Okay.
Up until this point, Jesus' ministry has focused on healing, teaching, performing miracles.
Right.
But after the Transfiguration, things begin to shift towards Jerusalem and the events that will lead to his death and resurrection.
That's a poignant shift in focus.
It is.
Before we move on, I want to go back to something you said earlier.
Okay.
You asked how we can live in the light of the Transfiguration.
Right.
I mean, what would you say to someone who wonders how that's even possible in everyday life?
It's a question we should all grapple with.
Yeah.
Perhaps it begins with recognizing the potential for glory that resides within each of us.
Okay.
We may not radiate physical light like Jesus did on that mountain.
Right.
But we are all made in the image of God.
Yes.
We all carry a piece of the divine.
So you're saying it's about connecting with that inner light.
Yes.
But how do we do that when life often feels far from a mountaintop experience?
It's true that life isn't always a mountaintop experience.
Right.
But even in the midst of the ordinary and the mundane,
Yeah.
we can experience moments of grace.
Okay.
Moments where we glimpse something bigger than ourselves.
Right.
It can be the beauty of nature.
Yeah.
An act of kindness.
Yeah, okay.
A moment of deep connection with another person.
Right.
Those times when something stirs deep within us.
That's a beautiful thought.
It is.
It's about paying attention and noticing those moments that spark something within us.
And allowing those moments to shape our lives, our choices, and how we treat others.
So the Transfiguration is more than just a beautiful story.
Yes.
It's a call to action.
Exactly. It's a challenge to let the light we've glimpsed in Jesus shine through our words and actions.
I'm inspired by that thought, but I also know that living this out daily can be a struggle.
Sure.
It's so easy to get caught up in our own stuff, our fears and insecurities.
It is.
How do we stay connected to that mountaintop experience when we are down in the valleys of life?
That's where practices like prayer meditation, spending time in nature, and connecting with a community of faith becomes so important.
Right.
They help us stay grounded, centered, and connected to the source of our strength.
It's like we need those reminders, those touchstones that help us remember who we are and what we are called to be.
We do, and we need each other, too.
Absolutely.
We were never meant to do this alone.
I love that we need that support and encouragement to keep going.
We do.
And to keep striving to live lives that reflect the glory we've glimpsed in Jesus.
That brings us to the final section of our deep dive.
Okay.
Where we can explore the practical implications of these stories for our lives today.
Right.
What are the key takeaways, the challenges and invitations that emerge from these encounters with Jesus? Let's finish up this journey through Matthew 14:17 together. It must have been truly overwhelming. I mean, I can only imagine. Matthew's gospel simply says they recognized them.
Recognize them, okay.
But remember, these figures were absolutely legendary.
Oh, yeah.
In Jewish tradition. I mean, their appearance would have been instantly meaningful.
So it's not just a random cameo.
No, not at all.
It's a deliberate connection.
It is.
Between Jesus and these towering figures of faith.
Exactly. And, it adds another layer
to
the meaning of the Transfiguration.
Okay. It's
not just about Jesus's individual glory.
Right.
But about his place within this larger story.
Gotcha.
Of God's plan for humanity.
It sounds like you're describing some kind of cosmic family reunion.
It kind of is, with Jesus at the center.
That's incredible.
It is a pivotal moment, though.
Okay.
Because up until this point, Jesus' ministry has focused on healing, teaching, performing miracles.
Yeah.
But after the Transfiguration, things begin to shift.
Shift
towards Jerusalem.
Okay.
And the events that will lead to his death and resurrection.
That's a poignant shift in focus.
It is.
Before we move on, I want to go back to something you said earlier.
Okay.
You asked how we can live in the light of the Transfiguration.
Right.
What would you say to someone who wonders how that's even possible in everyday life?
It's a question we should all grapple with.
Yeah.
Perhaps it begins by recognizing the potential for glory that resides within each of us.
Okay.
We may not radiate physical light like Jesus did on that mountain.
Right.
But we are all made in the image of God.
Yes.
We all carry a piece of the divine.
So you're saying it's about connecting with that inner light.
Yes.
But how do we do that when life often feels so far from the mountaintop experience?
It's true that life isn't always a mountaintop experience, but even in the midst of the ordinary and the mundane, we can experience moments of grace.
Okay.
Moments where we glimpse something bigger than ourselves. It could be the beauty of nature. An act of kindness.
Okay.
A moment of deep connection with another person.
Right.
Those times when something stirs deep within us.
That's a beautiful thought.
It is.
It's about paying attention and noticing those moments that spark something within us.
And allowing those moments to shape our lives, our choices, and how we treat others.
So the Transfiguration is more than just a beautiful story.
Yes.
It is a call to action.
Exactly. It's a challenge to let the light we've glimpsed in Jesus shine through our words and actions.
I'm inspired by that thought, but I also know that living this out daily can be a struggle.
Sure.
It's easy to get caught up in our own stuff.
It is.
Our fears and insecurities. How do we stay connected to that mountaintop experience when we are down in the valleys of life?
That's where practices like prayer meditation, spending time in nature, connecting with a community of faith, it becomes so important. They help us stay grounded, centered, and connected to the source of our strength.
It's like we need those reminders, those touchstones that help us remember who we are and what we are called to be.
We do. And we need each other too.
Absolutely.
We were never meant to do this alone.
I love that we need that support and encouragement to keep going.
I do.
To keep striving to live lives that reflect the glory we've glimpsed in Jesus.
That brings us to the final section of our deep dive.
Okay.
Where we can explore the practical implications of these stories for our lives today.
Right.
What are the key takeaways, the challenges, the invitations that emerge from these encounters with Jesus?
Okay.
Let's finish up this journey through Matthew 14 to 17 together.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Matthew 14 through 17.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It has. We've gone from those miraculous moments on the Sea of Galilee to that incredible scene on the mountaintop.
Yeah, we've covered a lot, from those amazing displays of power to that powerful declaration of faith.
Right. And even a glimpse of divine glory.
I know. It really makes you think.
It does. As we wrap things up, what would you say are the most important takeaways from these stories?
Well, I think one of the most striking things is how Jesus meets people right where they are,
Yeah.
He acknowledges both their physical and spiritual needs and responds with compassion and authority.
That's so evident in the story of feeding the 5,000.
Isn't it?
It wasn't just about filling empty stomachs. It felt like he was responding to a deeper hunger.
Yes.
A longing for something more.
Exactly. And it goes beyond addressing those individual needs,
Okay.
These stories also challenge us to think about our responsibility to those around us.
I see what you mean.
How can we be part of meeting the needs of our community?
Right.
Both practically and spiritually.
That's a good point. It's so easy to get caught up in our own lives. But these stories remind us that we're all connected. We're called to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. What else stands out to you?
Well, the story of the Canaanite woman is a powerful example of persistent faith.
It is.
Even when it seemed like Jesus was dismissing her, she refused to give up.
I know, her determination is just so inspiring. It reminds us that sometimes we need to keep praying.
Yes.
Keep asking, keep seeking until we find an answer.
And it's not just about getting what we want.
Right.
It's more about aligning our desires with God's will. It's about trusting that even when we don't understand what's happening, God is working everything out for good.
So it's about letting go of control and embracing that mystery of God's plan.
You got it. And that can be a challenge.
I can imagine.
Especially in a world that values self-sufficiency and instant gratification.
Yeah.
But, these stories invite us to step out of our comfort zones.
Right.
And embrace a different way of living.
A way of living that's built on humility, compassion, and a willingness to trust in something beyond ourselves.
Exactly. And that leads us to the most important takeaway of all.
Okay.
Recognizing Jesus as the Messiah, the Son of God.
Peter's confession in Caesarea Philippi is a turning point.
It is.
In the story, everything hinges on that declaration.
It's more than just words, though.
Right.
It's a call to action, an invitation to follow Jesus, to model our lives on his teachings and his example.
So it's not enough to simply say, I believe.
No.
We're called to put our faith into practice.
That's right. And that's where the Transfiguration comes in. It's not just a mystical event. It's a revelation of who Jesus is and what he is capable of.
It's like we're given a glimpse behind the scenes,
Yeah.
A sneak peek of the glory that awaits those who follow him.
And it's a reminder that even in the midst of suffering and darkness, there's a light that shines brighter than anything we can imagine.
Wow.
A light that has the power to transform our lives and the world around us.
That's a beautiful thought to end on. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
But before we go, I'm curious, which story resonated with you the most and why?
That's a tough one. They all speak to me in different ways if I had to choose. I'd say the Transfiguration has always had a special place in my heart. It reminds me that even in the darkest moments, there was always hope. A hope that's grounded in God himself.
It's a powerful image to hold on to, especially when life gets challenging.
It really is. And it leaves us with something to ponder.
Okay.
What mountaintop experiences have shaped your own faith journey?
Wow.
And how can you carry the light of those experiences into the world around you?
That is a great question for all of us to consider. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the miracles of Jesus. We hope you've been encouraged and challenged to go deeper in your own journey of